Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. I'm super excited for this guest today. He was a professional triathlete, two-time Olympic trials finalist in swimming, who is now a master coach for Ironman. He is the founder and CEO of one of the world's premier triathlon coaching businesses, trusted by everyone from Ironman world champions to first-time endurance athletes. His company has coached over 350 Ironman and 70.3 podiums and victories, including multiple world titles. The founder and CEO of Purple Patch Fitness. Please welcome Matt Dixon. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, and goodness me, my bio almost sounds impressive. So that's good. Who are they talking about there?
Right. Well, I'll tell my producers they did good copy editing on that, but it's funny just chatting with you. He's got my palms sweating because I'm approaching Ironman Ottawa, and the expectations and the logistics got me all wound up. So this is a perfect time to push that energy into the show.
Calming, smoothing coaching. So
there you go. Matt, I love talking about endurance and especially the endurance mindset. So could you tell us how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly?
Yeah, I think actually, for me personally, I'll say two things to that. Interesting. The first is a journey that I've gone on where when I started my own business, and I obviously put forth a lot of the energy, a lot of the traits that are necessary to be a great athlete, I just channeled that into business. And I never could have anticipated 2 decades ago that it would lead me to working with so many executive teams, so many leadership teams, trying to solve a challenge ultimately that is very, very different than how I first started coaching, which was trying to create world champions. Although, as I'm sure we'll unpack, closely related in other ways. And then the other thing I'd say is actually endurance mindset of being a father and partner. It's a real journey. My wife Kelly from Montana, and we've been married 14 years now. We've got a 13-year-old son, and it's amazing how it just cross pollinates into any piece of life, whether focusing on the most important things, the boulders and not the sand, and adaptability, change is ever present. Particularly the way that we live our life. So that's definitely two different channels that I've really leveraged that.
The breadcrumb you left for me there that I have to pick up is around your partner, parenting, children, and the endurance mindset. I've got two young girls as well. I guess they're not really getting young anymore, but my wife and I have that same principle of showing them endurance, showing them how to get knocked down and stand back up. They come to our races. They think it's sort of the normal lifestyle. I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper around sort of how you're seeing that show up, one as a parent, and then any illustrations that you have seen when you said, "Hey, my child just like that, he or she's enduring, like she's learning something from us that we've passed and that we're actively passing down."
Yeah, I'll go all the way back to actually when Baxter, my son, was born, and we have, like any new parent, you have no idea what's going on. You have no idea. You can't be prepared. And Kelly and I had a lot of conversations, and we put some building blocks into place to say this is, we're not going to be able to control everything, and we don't want to parent this young baby boy who now is a 13-year-old, which listeners will know is going through heavy transition around that age. We can't, we don't want to predict where he's going to come. We just want to provide every exposure, every opportunity, and try and equip him to be the best well-rounded version of whatever he wants to do in his life. And we started with several things that we said, these are building blocks. We really want to encourage him to learn a musical instrument, to hopefully do a little bit of theater, maybe to learn a language, really good for the brain, to do a whole bunch of different sports, including we wanted him to be able to swim for water safety, to ski, because that's an activity that we can do as a family for the rest of our lives, and to ride a bike. It's a good skill set to have. Those building blocks are actually still, when he's 13, are still in place. He's bilingual. He speaks French. He plays guitar in a little rock band. He does all sorts of different sports. But it's interesting now, Kelly and I run Purple Patch together. So it can't help but have an imprint, much in the way as a CEO is ultimately a role model for the culture of any organization, and habits, behaviors, actions will have an imprint on what and how his team take different, influence from, and their team members below that. Baxter can't help but be influenced by how Kelly and I live our lives and the organization we run. We're in a performance organization. So interestingly, for me and for Kelly, one of the big challenges, he's a really athletic kid. His sport, ironically, that he's really fallen in love with is the sport that I started with, swimming. It's the reason I came to the US. That's what I find in the Olympic trials. That's provided a different challenge for me because I really want to ensure that I encourage support, etc., as does Kelly. But I don't want to have any sort of imprint that it becomes my journey. And so the way that we've combated that is making sure it's a sport that they love you to commit very early. We're like, no, you're not going to swim 8 times a week. You're going to swim 2 or 3 times a week. You're going to do multi-sport. You're going to keep it mixed up. And, and helping him in that journey. But there is no doubt that through that experience, swimming is a very, it's a very quantitative sport. You pass, fail in the results, you win or lose. Yeah, it's in a controlled environment. He has gone through the fostering of commitment, of camaraderie, of coachability, of ups and downs, so adaptability and resilience. And you see that expressed in his confidence, his passion of the journey, etc. So yeah, it's a pretty, I know that's a pretty long-winded answer, but it's been fascinating to follow. And the one thing I will say is also as a parent to really step back and not coach, because he's got his coaches. And that is a really important factor for me to really have developed as I want to be his dad. I don't want to be his coach.
That's so important, Matt. And it aligns with the philosophy that Monique and I have as well. I've had a sports background. I played soccer up until college, swimmer all through my life, did a bunch of long distance swims a handful of years ago. And both of my girls are really into swimming, and it's really difficult not to sort of nudge the coach and be like, hey, they should be doing this and they should be doing that, or sort of break them into their own training sessions, just one-on-one with dad. I got to tell you though, I refuse now to do a 50-meter swim against my girls because I know they can beat me. But until that's proven, I think I'm still faster.
Well, I had a slightly different experience of that. We were just up in Montana. That's where Kelly's from. So we spent a lot of time up in Montana, and Baxter really in love with it, wanted to go swimming. So I swam with him, and I haven't swum with him for about a year, and I don't swim that much. I made sure that I beat him on every single swim. I never let him beat me, just by a bit. It's getting closer, but he's got to fail a lot if he's going to go on and be successful in life. So I made sure as his dad that I still made him fail.
Good man. Good man. Yeah, my girls were just at their year end, the summer swim all-stars this past weekend, and they did a really, really good job. And so there's a lot of pride coming across. I'm going to change topics on you a little bit and talk about the professional athlete who is sort of transitioning out of professional sport as a competitor and into the next phase of life. And I suspect you've worked with many, many athletes that, again, have hit from a performance perspective and in the pool or at triathlon, world champion, et cetera, et cetera. As they transition into the next phase of their life, what are some key sort of components to help them kind of take on that new adventure?
It's really interesting you asked me that, because when I reflect on my coaching career with elite athletes, one of my biggest points of pride was we had really good retention amongst our squad of athletes. We took a team approach in an individual sport. So I was typically working with about 12 athletes at a time, but we had a lot of athletes that stuck with us a long time. So I had coaching relationships that sometimes lasted a decade. And that's a really important chapter of life, starting at 25, retiring at 35, starting at 28, retiring at 38. And the second point of pride is that in that journey, I always, as a coach, wanted to start to infuse as the journey went on, what's next, setting yourself up, quite often encouraging them to have some side gigs, even though it is all encompassing, but actually do some work, both for the brain. Some athletes benefited from that, but also from some skill development and that side of stuff. So we really try to prepare our athletes for that transition. Change is hard. And, even if it's positive change is incredibly difficult for us as human beings. For a professional athlete, it is 10x as hard because your routine and structure has been very singular focused around you. And that your whole identity, particularly nowadays with everything wrapped up in social media for these athletes, very quickly their star is fading. So they go from I'm winning Ironman to so within 2 years, I'm kind of irrelevant. Many people that are new to the sport don't even know them. So we have to help them go through change. One of the biggest concerns that most athletes had is they've spent their prime earning years in many ways, or at least priming years before the great earning years, 25 to 35 or 30 to 40 in professional sport, and they don't retire with enough capital to live for the rest of their life without having to worry. So they're starting without a huge resume. The important part of it, and I think this is really important for listeners, is what they have got is they have got a journey of sport that has ignited, polished, honed, and developed into a huge toolkit of a set of mindset traits that transfer into anything in life. So when you think about a great employee in any organization, grit, determination, focus, collaboration, adaptability, resilience, all of these things, a professional athlete has that tenfold. And if they are able to apply that into another endeavor, they accelerate. So one of the great athletes that I coached, her name was Sarah Piampiano, and she was 10 years, she retired at 40. Within 3 years, she's one of the leading real estate agents in Colorado. And all she did, she had no background in that industry at all. She just applied the traits of high performance into a different arena. That's really interesting because these traits are traits. They are transferable. They're not genetic. And so, so I'm not sure if I'm tailoring off of your question very well, but the key answer to this is helping them set up and realizing as sport evaporates and they move on. It's like, what are your passions? What is something that you really want to go? And your biggest chapter of life is not behind you. Your biggest chapter of life, if you're starting at 35 and your biggest imprint on the world is all in front of you. You have to now, as an athlete, apply the very same traits that fueled your success in professional sport into wherever your passion now lies. And once they find that, you see them go on to great things. And it's going to include some turbulence over the first year or two because they're navigating change, and that's really difficult.
Matt, that's really well said. And where my thinking was going was, that professional athlete who is transitioning from being a pro into entrepreneurship, right? There's one journey between being a professional athlete and getting your real estate license and becoming a top-notch real estate agent. But there's systems and tools and training sort of in between those two endpoints. But when you're taking into an entrepreneurial journey, you're kind of figuring it out on your own. And I'd love to hear some stories or some examples of athletes that you've worked with or seen who have really taken on the entrepreneurial, started a business, created a product, how they've sort of transitioned into that stage of life.
Well, I would argue there isn't, in parallel with starting an actual, business like a tech company or something like that, what's more entrepreneurial than deciding to become a professional athlete? That is the ultimate entrepreneurial journey, because you got to figure it out yourself. And what do? You have a passion, you have a certain skill set and talent. You start building a team around you for folks that can help you, and you apply your focus. And if you think about any great professional athlete, they don't just show up with physical talent and start winning championships. They go on a journey where they basically have to establish, excuse me, almost a business plan for themselves. It just happens to be an athletic plan, and they have to focus on the right things for them. The same principles apply. You go and apply the same components. And where my role as a coach was to go back and help those athletes see that picture and see it through that lens. So, we had Jesse Thomas, who was a wonderful, one of the best half Ironman and Ironman athletes in the US and globally in the world. Is one of the top performers in the world, but one of the great US athletes. He went on with his wife and created an energy food company called Picky Bars, and became very, very popular. He leveraged his brand. He built a business. He was an engineer by trade, very smart guy, came out of Stanford, but was not Stanford Business School, it was Stanford Engineering School. But he went on and built an energy food company based on the same principles, basically taking an athletic journey and that blueprint of what it takes to create a world-class athlete and applied it to business. He sold that business to Laird Superfoods, Gabby and Laird Hamilton, Gabby Reese and Laird Hamilton. Tim Reed, world champion that I coached, fantastic. He transitioned out of the sport, set up his own coaching organization, has multiple coaches under him, sort of the Matt Dixon blueprint that I did at Purple Patch, launched a really successful podcast, went on that same journey. So that there are almost countless examples. Rasmus Henning, an Olympian that I coached, that is Danish in his own organization, CEO now, gone in his own entrepreneurial journey. So that has led him to become a CEO and a leader of an organization. So it's the same principle, I think, applies. Whatever journey you're going on, there is no sort of, to borrow an English phrase, school of hard knocks example than being a professional triathlete. Let me sort of straddle that into something. Think about a really high performing business executive, and think about let's CEO, CFO, doesn't matter. Someone that's really high performing what are the challenges that they face? Where they're in a high pressure environment, they've got huge competing demands. They need capacity to step up when the shit hits the fan, on demand. They need to show up their best every single day. And there is no shortcut to their journey. There's no hacking of this. Yeah. If you're going to be a high performing executive, it's a journey you've got to go on, etc. I just outlined there what the journey of a professional athlete is. So as long as the athlete is smart enough to apply that lesson, it is the best business school that you can possibly have in my estimation.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example of, looking at your current skills and experiences and figuring out how they apply to your new journey, your passion, wherever you want to go. Because it is the same principle, right? That's why we're talking about the endurance mindset, where it's not in a box for athletes and it's not in a box for CEOs. It's really the same principles just being applied in different aspects. The one thing I would add to that, Matt, is that continuous curiosity and learning and development and training on both perspectives, right? Of running and leading a business, running and leading your family, and running and leading your professional life.
It's like growth and learning. If I got asked, if you asked me the question, who are the most successful athletes, who are the highest performers, leaders that you've worked with, and I had this somewhat unique experience of doing both at the same time, so this parallel. So the whole time I could look at and compare a world-class athlete with a CEO, for example, going along at over 15 years. So it was a real curiosity, and I would identify two things that are the ones that separated themselves, that weren't just really good and talented, that became the proverbial champions. The first was an absolute undying thirst of growth and learning, exactly what you said there. The second is coachability. So if I go back, those athletes that I mentioned and many others beside, they didn't just realize a coach was important. They demanded it. They were so coachable. And if we extended that to athletes that are household names, whether it's LeBron James or Simone Biles or Serena Williams, that is a key common trait. They are highly coachable. And that doesn't learn. In fact, their desire to put a team around them amplifies as they get further into their journey. So coachability and thirst for learning, that's the same, by the way. I've worked with plenty of well-known CEOs and tech founders and everything else. The common traits, the ones where I know it's going to work, where they get the most yield is, I want to learn, I want to grow, and how can you help me? What do I need to do to become more coachable? And that's, coaching is not, or being coachable is not giving up ownership of your journey to someone else. It's not about being, just doing what you're told. It's about partnership, collaboration, leaning on a sounding board, providing feedback, receiving feedback, etc. And it is a skill, by the way. It's not something that's just innate. You can develop coachability in the same way as you can develop all of the traits in my mind that make up what we would label the athlete mindset in many ways.
So I'm going to shift topics on you again. So yesterday I was in a golf match, and I'm talking to it was a team golf match, and one of the guys on the other team was really interested in my long distance triathlon career, right? How many have you done? How have you done it? Blah, blah, blah. And give me some stories. And one of the things he said, and I hear this all the time, is, yeah, I'm interested in doing that, but I just don't have the time. And I said, I kind of pushed back, and I was in a sort of a competitive moment, so I didn't want to be too friendly, but you and I have talked about this, and this really leads into Purple Patch Fitness. Talk to us about that response to the athlete who comes to you, the CEO, the first timer, it comes to your facility and says, I have a dream of doing a long distance triathlon, but I just don't have the time, or I can't do the swim. Like, there's all these roadblocks that keep popping up, and they're pretty common. I'd love for you to start knocking down some of those roadblocks for us.
Yeah, it's without being rude to your buddy, he's just not a part of the enlightened yet, which makes it sound like it's a cult. But and I don't mean it like that, because it is a paradox. Our most precious, I'm sure everyone listening is really busy. Everyone has huge competing demands. The one thing we want more of is time. And it's counterintuitive to say, great, you're really busy. You have massive competing demands. And now to get more time, to get time back, to gain capacity, now put this thing on top of your life. But the key is where that becomes a truth and things become negative is if you take this goal, this challenge, and you just dump it on top of an already busy life. The only way you be successful, the real unlock, is when you successfully integrate it into life as a set of daily practices to unlock your effectiveness. I'll give you a mini 1-minute case study on this, where you couldn't have an example of someone that was more busy, that actually was really successful at this. A guy that I coached, Sami Inkinen, and many listeners will know the organization Trulia. So Sami was the co-founder of Trulia, the real estate search engine. And when he came to me, he was a really keen triathlete as well. And he said, I want to race Ironman triathlons, but I'm, launched this startup and it's complete chaos. Everything that applies to launching and building a startup. And in the year that Trulia went public, so, went through their IPO, Sami didn't just finish an Ironman, he won the amateur title in the Ironman Hawaii. And for folks that are listening that know Ironman, he was under 9 hours in the toughest race there is. His training recipe was 10 hours a week. And so we sometimes had 6 or 7 hours, sometimes we had 11 or 12 hours, but he averaged 10 hours a week, which is about 50% of what was the prevailing preconceptions of what it took to be successful at that level at that time. So we got a lot of pushback around that can't be true, but the good thing about Sami is he tracks everything. Here's the key thing. The natural first question is, how did he have time? And it's the wrong question. Because what Sami went through, we faced an optimization challenge. And this goes some way to providing the answer to your question. By Sami prioritizing and committing to personal well-being and this training journey, it forced radical prioritization. Every week, we had to look at everything he had at work and say, what do we need to get done this week? And what is actually a distraction? So it actually forced prioritization. Secondly, it created an anchor and framework of his week to really make sure that every moment in the week was really useful, including, by the way, I'm saying sleep and intentional recovery. So we actually infused this stuff that could fuel his training and fuel his energy. And and so he ended up building greater energy, more stable energy, enhanced cognitive function because of investing in this. All of the things that help him show up every day as a leader. And on top of it, we talked about mindset. I won't go back into all of those resilience and adaptables and everything else. The journey of triathlon that he went on, that anyone goes on, by the way, and it doesn't need to be triathlon, but it's getting out of your comfort zone, taking on a challenge. That's the environment, a low risk environment where you continually garden. In other words, you ignite, you hone, you develop all of these traits that are prerequisite as a leader. So for Sami, if you asked him and you asked anyone that decides to take on these challenges, it's an investment to get time back, to drive effectiveness, to improve their leadership, to heighten capacity. So he became a really successful leader because of his investment in this challenge. And I think the key thing for your buddy listening or for anyone else is it doesn't need to be Ironman. It doesn't need to be triathlon. It might be for someone moving from sedentary to saying, I'm going to try and walk 10,000 steps. It might be for someone to say, I'm going to go on a hiking weekend and I need to walk really consistently with my friend. And I'm going to go and do this, whatever. It can be a marathon, whatever it is. But there is a reason that so many executives get out of their comfort zone and take on challenges is because by taking on a challenge, you improve capacity, improve daily performance, build resiliency, and unlock your effectiveness. It's true. And by the way, someone that just said this really recently, if you go back to the Forbes article, was Jamie Dimon, that most people have heard of. His biggest piece of advice to young executives and CEOs, think and act like an Olympic athlete. And that's basically what we're talking about here. So it's not about not having time. Now, we do some very specific things to unlock that and to integrate it within Purple Patch. Happy to go into, but I think I've been talking for about 10 minutes.
No, it's that's where my next question was going to lead into, because it's a philosophy that I haven't seen across the industry. And I've talked to many coaches. I've been coached by coaches. I love my coach. They're doing great work for me this year and prior year. But this is a different philosophy.
Yeah.
And it's, well, I'll just stop there and let you kind of talk a little bit more broadly about Purple Patch and who should be seeking you, and give us some more intel there.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a massive range of people. This will probably make your knees touch in wonderment, but and hopefully this doesn't come across as egotistical, but it drives home the point, and then I'll provide some actionable things of what we do. But over the last decade or so, we've qualified more than 1,500 athletes to World Championship events, so the Hawaii Ironman or the Half Ironman World Championship. So it's a large group of athletes. Those are of all different levels. For the athletes that are doing Ironman, for a Purple Patch athlete, the average weekly training hours are 10 hours a week. So that's incredibly low relative to industry standard, but we have the results. Our last 3 athletes that actually won their age group in Hawaii all happened to be CEOs of different organizations. So this is real. Now, they were physically gifted. Yeah, make no mistake about it. They had a bunch of physical traits. It's not that everyone is going to become an Ironman world champion. At the same time, we don't need to become Ironman world champions to leverage the benefits of this. The whole approach that has served us to be so successful is, number one, we want to make sure our athletes have a huge platform of health. So if you can show up with vibrancy, this can be additive into life, and you can be healthy, you're going to build the magic word in high performance, which is consistency. We also want to train and ignite all of these mindset traits. So how do you do it? Well, what you can't do is take a fixed number of training hours every single week and say, this is the magic program. Now go and do this, because it leads to impossible sets of decisions for athletes, because life is a living, breathing thing. And so having a plan that's a fixed spreadsheet isn't going to work, because life is not a spreadsheet. So instead, what we do is we have a very clear coaching model that I won't go into now. But what it looks like on a week-to-week basis is attacking the problem from the other end. So if you look at 7 days of training, we want to make sure that those 7 days don't look like chicken casserole, where all the sessions might be good, but they're all just equal priority. We have 2 or 3 days at most that are the key workouts, the really important ones that are going to drive the performance needle. The rest of the workouts are important, valuable for endurance, for resilience, but more supportive. We designate them as supportive. What we do at the start of each week, whether you're coached individually, whether it's more autonomous as a part of our program, is you go through this process, which we call the Sunday special. Okay, from CEO all the way down to intern, we do it at our organization. Every athlete from pro to newbie does this. And it starts with life. What are my life commitments? I'm taking Johnny to soccer. I've got a date night with my wife or husband. I've blah, blah, blah. All of the things that are important, dental appointments, and you put those in. You then go through work and you say, what do I need to get done with work? You're not planning agendas here, but what are the things that I'm going to focus on in my role, whatever your position is? What are the key meetings? And you start to plot that out. Some people love to do this on a Google Calendar, other people on a notepad. It doesn't matter. Then what you've got left over is a fixed amount of time. And into that time, you have to put training, you have to put sleep and recovery and social time, you have to put time to have proper meals, fueling, hydration, etc. And so let's say that 1 week life is flowing, it's really busy. Maybe you've got work travel. You might only have 6 hours a week of training availability. So let's optimize the program for those 6 hours. Let's get the key workouts in. Let's scale the others. Other weeks, maybe your friends and family are away. Maybe you've got a couple of days off work. Life ebbs. Now we can leverage that. Now we might be able to train 12, 13, 14 hours, whatever it is. But when you layer that on week after week, month after month, it becomes not a luxury or bolt on, not something that you're trying to force into where you're compromising sleep or social time or work performance. It's a part of your program. You're organizing all of the components of life. And that is the biggest unlock, because now the sport isn't competing with the relationships, competing with work performance. In fact, it's additive to work performance.
And I suspect that the people around you also appreciate that approach, right? I'm as you're going through that, there are many weekends, and my wife's got me into this. She's a long distance triathlete, semi-retired at the moment. And so she gets it. Like, she understands that my key workouts have to come pretty high on the priority list. But there's some times that I'm deciding to go out on a long ride and she's dealing with the kids at home and getting them to 15 different things. I suspect going through this process, this unlocking, also allows for that communication to happen sort of with your partner, right? It's like, hey, we're all sitting down and talking about what are the family priorities this week? What are my work priorities this week? And then the rest I'm going to fit in, not fit in, but prioritize in what you have available. And so I can almost see it, man, as a real communication tool, not just for the athlete themselves, but for those who are around them.
Yeah, I mean, even in a family, Kelly and I do it together. So there's a part of the Sunday special, as you call it, that you do on your own, but then we work together and look at it, and it's communication. I'll give you another example for folks that are training for marathons or training for Ironman races. So many people, it's a very, very important and somewhat scary challenge. You've just gone through the journey to get ready for this race that's coming up for you. And let's just call it, as it starts to get hot, as things start to really dial in, that more race specific block of training, 12 or 16 weeks. So many athletes allow every single weekend to be, I'm out on Saturday, I leave at whatever time they leave, 6 a.m., I'm not back till 1 p.m. That's going to cause tension and strain. And ultimately, it's not necessary to do that, to be ready to go and be really successful in these events. So I encourage, partners and families to plan ahead and say, okay, give me 3, 4, 5 weekends that we are going to designate as the sort of over distance, the bigger blocks of times. And then give me other weekends that we're going to go really minimal. And we're going to build a really good week of training with maybe a little higher intensity, but you can sneak in a 90-minute or 2-hour workout and then be with the family with the rest of time. And then when you are going to be gone, typically, let's say in your example, if it was then your wife and the kids, they're like, okay, I know that's coming. It's not a surprise. Greg's going away and doing it. So I'm going to go and do this with the kids. And then you're going to meet afterwards, whatever it might be. So exactly your point. Suddenly now, the other important constituents in your life are partners in your journey, rather than constantly negotiating. That's not a way to create ultimately a lifestyle, because if we think about why you're doing this, why anyone does this, it's great for pride, satisfaction, ego, fun challenge. But real success comes when you integrate a challenge-based lifestyle to fuel not just your longevity, your health, but how you show up as a partner, as a father or mother, how you show up as an executive and as a leader. And so it all cross-pollinates. So we want longevity in this, using a very cute, trendy word at the time.
That's amazing. Matt, an audience member wants to get in touch with you, wants to learn more about Purple Patch Fitness. What's the best social media platform? Give us some of your intel.
Yeah, you can follow us. We do a lot of education on Instagram. Is probably the best place for that. We try, and that's very education heavy. A lot of fun, different videos. That's Purple Patch Fitness. So at Purple Patch Fitness, and our website is purplepatchfitness.com. The truth is, if people ever just want a complimentary consultation or needs assessment, as we call it, it's completely no pressure. We are not for everyone. We understand that. We serve a specific need. We look for partnerships. We have a great global community. People can just reach out to info@purplepatchfitness.com. Mention that you are listening to this show. We'd be happy to have a chat, explain our programs, give them a tour of the website, understand, most importantly, the goals, the challenges that the listener faces, and then we'd have a conversation. And I will say that extends, by the way, into we have a program that is really taken the last 2 years that is called Win Cycle, which is our leadership program about equipping leadership teams to perform under pressure, navigate change, foster all of the conditionings, basically taking all of the lessons of my journey in world-class sport and applying it the same as we've talked about today in many ways on a singular basis to teams to drive sustainable high performance and great culture. So if people are interested in that for their teams with workshops, keynotes, etc., happy to explore. So yeah, really am.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, right? We're all sort of thirsting around this endurance mindset that listen to this show. And so we didn't really explore that side of it. And I'm really happy, Matt, that you mentioned it, because it is those principles, just beating the point one more time, really do drive team performance and longevity, and really apply in that business setting, and being able to bring that into a team, not just a team that's outside competing, but a team inside competing. That's a real asset. And as an entrepreneur myself and a guy who likes to build teams, I can attest to that. Matt, it's been awesome having you on the show. Audience members, if you like the show, please subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up. Reach out to Matt. Follow him on Instagram and what he's doing out there. It is a not completely different approach, but a really refreshing mindset and methodology. And, I could see why you have long-term athletes and executives that work with you and your team, because it's a very refreshing approach. Anyway, I could talk to you for hours. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And best of luck to everyone out there. And any leaders, you want to do it, we're happy to send you a brochure or give you information on that stuff as well. So just reach out. No pressure from mine there, but great. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation.
It was my pleasure. And all those links are down in the show notes too, if you didn't pick them up off firsthand. So just scroll down and you'll find them.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.